This is Andy Packham, Chief Architect, part of the Microsoft ecosystem here at HCLTech. I'm here today joined by Srini Kompella, who's head of our data and AI practice, and Robin Lester from Microsoft. Look, why don't you guys just quickly introduce your roles and then we'll get into some of the questions.
Yeah, sure. So thanks, Andy. So Srini Kompella, I lead data and AI practice globally within HCLTech. Pleasure to be here.
So yes, Robin Lester. So I am an architect in the partner side of Microsoft. My role at Microsoft is to help partners such as yourselves to create solutions in the AI space.
Thanks. And look, thanks for joining. But AI, everybody's talking about AI today, but it's not easy. And we're finding, in our customer conversations, there are lots of challenges. So can I ask both of you, what are the biggest challenges you're seeing in those customer conversations, and how are we going about addressing those?
So if we take it, there's obviously a multitude of different conversations. One of the key ones is around misunderstanding about what AI is. We sometimes find customers wanting to just take data and AI that data, which obviously is not only not practical, it also goes against a lot of our kind of responsible AI principles as well, just throwing AI at something without any really clear goals or guidelines around it. So yes, that's sometimes a problem. And then on the other side, when we do find people have a really good use case for AI, they will start down that route only to find that they don't have the base data or the base system set up in place. So sometimes, AI is a lead-in to kind of develop that back-end infrastructure and architecture first to get better quality data to then present to the AI, because obviously AI will only do what you tell it. If there are biases in the data, if there are problems with the data, if there are inconsistencies, AI is going to pick up on them and represent them as well as the things you do want it to represent. So yeah, a lot of conversations around data. And then we also find a lot of blockers around organizational buy-in as well. So it's with any kind of technology that has a lot of hype around it, there'll be people in an organization wanting to do it, but ultimately to implement AI in an organization needs to be an organization-wide conversation to do it the correct way, to do it responsibly, and to have enough buy-in for people to be able to be constructing those projects and doing them correctly.
Yep. So absolutely. I mean, a lot of similar themes that we've been hearing from our customers as well. And as we are engaging with customers in the AI journey, I mean, one of the key themes that we are now beginning to talk about is how do enterprises scale AI at that enterprise level? So, I think 2023, there was tremendous amount of, interest, public interest, getting generated with AI. And as Rob said, I think, there's also, a bit of an understanding that needs to be developed further. Gen AI is taking over, but really, I mean, what is the overall AI? How does it blend together with generative AI to deliver the business value? So there's absolutely that understanding. But I think 2023, helped people start figuring out how AI can benefit enterprises, how AI can benefit employees, how AI can benefit customers, how AI can save costs, etc. So, but in terms of the true value, it really comes when you put AI into production, right? It's really about, deploying it in the systems, using it day in and day out. If you're thinking about customer experience, I mean, the customers need to feel it day in and day out. It's not just about experiments. So one big challenge that we've been seeing is that, a big chunk of experiments don't make it to production. It's a very high percentage, right? So, and that seems to be the limiting factor right now for enterprises to truly realize the power of AI. So then if we really double click on, what's really going on there, because there's a lot of effort and dollars that went into the experiments, in the last 15, 18 months. So if we look at it, the number one is, what are the business cases? Having a clarity on what are the business outcomes or the business problems that, enterprises are trying to apply AI for. It's no longer about, proving whether the technology works or not. I think the technology is already, quite powerful. It'll continue to evolve, but what are the business problems? And then once those are identified, that's really about translating the use cases to business cases.
Yeah.
So we are seeing large number of use cases. Some enterprises have thousands of use cases, right? But how many of them really, get converted into business case? So when we start applying the filters, that percentage is really low today. So then it's a question of, even the detailing of the business cases. Rob talked about, responsible AI. Should you really be applying AI here? Fundamental question, right? So, why are you applying AI? That's one of the starting points of being responsible about AI. Then the other aspect is also in terms of, figuring out what are the true costs of putting AI into production. So a lot of, companies are beginning to realize that they have to think about an AI estate, before putting everything into production with the right guardrails, with the right governance, with the right corrective actions, etc. So and once people start thinking through this, then I think Rob alluded to it as well, data. A lot of the experiments are being run with, sample data. Or, thanks to generative AI, there's synthetic data that is being used. But then the real world data can be quite different. So that's the second big blocker we are seeing, in terms of, moving into production. Then the next aspect is AI governance. So we're beginning to see some companies establish AI councils to drive better governance from business perspective, from an IT perspective, from a compliance perspective. And it's really about, bringing in the responsible AI, as a design element rather than an afterthought. So that AI governance is the next big theme. The final one is in terms of, having a blueprint for scaling, right? So we're beginning to see with all the use cases, getting processed, we're beginning to see companies, thinking about establishing AI estates so that they can really scale at an enterprise level.
So Srini and both of you mentioned responsible AI, and I think that is critical. There's a massive amount of hype, but it's about driving that conversation about value. And for me, that comes from becoming trusted. So again, how do we do that? How do we kind of establish trust, and across what dimensions do we need to establish trust?
Okay, so obviously, as a public cloud provider, we live and die on the level of trust that people give us. No one would use Azure if we weren't trustworthy. So we have, we've got Microsoft Trust website that kind of goes through all the different certifications and that kind of stuff that we have to ensure that we do things the right way. We have a lot of principles as well internally that control why, what we're doing, what data we are or aren't allowed to look at. But I think ultimately trust comes down to having transparency, which is one of our fundamental kind of AI principles. Just being really open about where the data is, being open about who has access to the data, how it's being used, basically is not by us. And also having feedback mechanisms. So ultimately, the things that we do to make sure people trust us are the same kind of things that we put out in our responsible AI principles. So yeah, having transparency, having feedback loops. We've learned a lot over the years about how to do AI responsibly. We have a very long history, pedigree in that place, all the way back from when we released a chatbot it's called Tay. It must have been about 10 years ago, probably a bit longer, and it was a really good example of well done AI that didn't have responsible kind of principles or responsible guardrails in place. It was a chatbot that learned. It was basically, we released it, and within the first day, a load of people from 4chan had gotten and started talking to it, taught it. Actually, it was a learning chatbot, taught it some really bad things. It turned into a racist, over-sexualized 14-year-old girl very quickly. We took it down. We learnt the lesson. And from that, we developed all the principles of what you need to have in place to make sure that you're not doing harm to yourself, you're not doing harm to your customers, you're not doing harm to any third parties, you're not taking away anyone's rights. And so we kind of boiled that down into Microsoft Research releasing a paper that is called the Responsible AI Maturity Model, which basically goes through all the levels of responsibility in different areas, from organizational wide to how you're developing your applications, and obviously we have lots of toolings and stuff in this place to help partners and customers make sure they're creating things responsibly.
Yep.
So thank you. We all remember the story, and I think that what always impresses me is the transparency there. Yeah. This is a story we all learn from those kind of things. So thanks for that. Srini, that trust story again?
Oh, absolutely. I think, the key words are trust and transparency, and you build trust with transparency, they kind of, feed off each other, right? It's essentially how we trust individuals, right? It's constant interactions, there's credibility that goes from transaction to transaction, so it builds trust. So, so that's probably the simplistic way to look at it, right? Trust and transparency, trust but verify. But then there's a tremendous amount of hard work that goes behind to make this happen. It just doesn't come easy. So, there are regulations in Europe, that provide a really good framework to start with, right? But so it's comprehensive. There are best practices that are, published by academic institutions. Rob talked about Microsoft. We've got some checklists and templates, so to speak, right? All to aid enterprises to, establish, the trust and transparency. But if you really double click down, right? So one is, how do you take this and create an enterprise level, policy framework, right? So it's got to be there saying that, we're going to use AI, but we're going to use AI responsibly, right? And this is how we're going to do it. This is how we're going to, create the transparency for both the creators and the consumers of AI. Right? The creators, if you look at it, they've got to, do it by design, not as an afterthought, right? So that then gets cascaded down everywhere. Previously we were talking about it, right? Even on a business case. Why AI? Right? And as part of that, some of the things that Rob talked about, need to come in. Is it harmful? Is it prejudicial? Right? Is it creating a negative impact? So then, it's got to be a question mark saying that, okay, we got to flesh this out more from a business case standpoint before you move forward, right? Now, there is another element as well. When we are talking about AI, responsible AI, right? The models, the people who are creating the models, yes, there could be bias and you can control it, and you can actually, control it a lot better. The bigger problem is essentially, around the data that you're training the model on, right? A lot of the bias, because at the end of the day, the AI model, it is garbage in, garbage out. So if you're feeding, a wrong set of data, you get the wrong set of outcomes. So when we are talking about responsible AI, we got to consider the data sets. So if you're training the AI model on prejudicial data sets, biased data sets, the bias will automatically creep through AI. And you see the output by AI, but the real issues are in data. So that's where, when we are talking about responsible AI, we got to look at it holistically across both data and AI, right? So I think some of the, people are calling it as data poisoning because there can be willful, potential bad actors who can, push in, poison data, which will impact AI, negatively. So how do you filter for that? And how do you create the transparency around what, we call as observability of data, right? So I think it's holistic, policies, regulations, frameworks, keywords being trust and transparency. And the big aspect is to look at data real closely, not just AI.
So look, final question. Yeah, none of us can do this alone, right? It's incredibly complex. And Microsoft have always been strong in the partner ecosystem. But just talk a little bit about why partners are important, if you would.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we're obviously quite a big organization, but there's no way we could scale to the size that we need to support the customers if we didn't have partners there. So absolutely, partners are really just an extension of Microsoft. And so with our partner ecosystem, obviously we have the division that I work in GPS, Global Partner Solutions, to there essentially to support those partners, to help them understand the kind of the principles that we have, to help them with the technologies. Because ultimately we create a lot of tooling. We don't really create a lot of solutions. We create some solutions, but we don't create a lot of solutions. So we create the tooling, we give those to our partners. Our partners create amazing solutions with that tooling. And then they feed back to us what they need. And so that it turns into a kind of circle of help and creating like amazing new things.
Yep.
So, Robert, I think that's really important, the ecosystem. So, Srini, the final question, how are we evolve in that ecosystem?
Oh, absolutely. I think he said it right. I mean, that's exactly how we are working with Microsoft. So they have built fantastic technology. They continue to evolve it. Our job as system integrator is to, integrate those technologies and build solutions and deliver those, help deliver those outcomes for our clients. So, for example, we've created this entire, initiative around scaling AI at enterprise level. And to enable that, we're calling this as the Enterprise AI Foundry, right? So that's really bringing in a lot of the elements that we were talking about. How do you bring in the data? How do you bring in the AI together? How do you bring in the infrastructure in the right way? So, in effect, all these coming together help clients, scale AI and deliver better outcomes for their customers, for their enterprises. So as part of this, we are stitching together the technologies from Microsoft. We're also working with several other partners, and we are stitching together their technologies as well, because our customers are going to need a lot of these technologies to make things happen, and they have the choice, right? And we enable the choice, right? And of course, we work closely with Microsoft in co-developing, some of the assets, co-developing some of the propositions, so that at the end of the day, look, we are in the age of AI, right? Whether we want, we really are. It's a question of, how fast can we evolve in a good way, in a responsible way, so applying the technology. So that's our job. So with the Foundry construct, as an example, we bring in the Microsoft technologies, other partners' technologies. We've invested into building some assets, all the sole purpose being how do we help our companies, customers, scale AI at an enterprise level. So the entire partner ecosystem is vital for us. Because we are not building all technologies. We are building some level of accelerators to, on the journey, but we are relying heavily on technologies, cutting edge technologies coming in from partners such as Microsoft.
So, Robin, Srini, thank you very much. I think you mentioned all the key things. It's about partnership. Yeah, it's about establishing. It's about thinking about the data, and it's about doing that in a way that's kind of responsible. Holds ourselves accountable for delivering this in a way that is beneficial. So, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.